All right, we are going to practice a few more trig identity simplifying and proving, I guess. We did 1 through 4 in class, so this is the back side of those notes. We're going to do 5, 6, 7, and 8 together, and then you're going to do 9 and 10 on your own. So our goal was to turn these into sine and cosine. So I've got this little handy guy right here. Kind of just hold up to the screen right now for a second in case you need to see it. 3D. You should have those jotted down. So we're going to turn all of our trigs into sine and cosine. Our job is going to be to make sure that over here we're going to try to turn this left side so that it equals the right side. So I'm going to kind of freeze the right side as it is. I'm not going to do anything to it. And I'm going to turn these into sine and cosine. So tangent, we know, is equal to sine over cosine. So I have sine x over cosine x. That is just the tangent part. Now I'm going to come up here and change. Cosecant is 1 over sine. So over here, I'm going to write 1 over sine x. So the first step literally is taking these two trig functions individually and writing them in terms of sine and cosine. Now I'm just going to use regular mathematical rules. I don't care what's over here. I'm dividing fractions. So dividing a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to take divided by 1 over sine x and turn it into times sine x over 1, because dividing by fractions is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Sine times sine is equal to sine squared. So there's my sine squared x. And cosine times 1 is cosine x. And I will now point out that those two things are exactly the same, and I'm done with that one. So keep that in mind. That was all it took on that. I'm now going to erase those. If you need to get all that written down, pause your video real quick and take care of that. I'm going to erase. So pause it, copy down because it's gone. Erasing it all. All right, so number 6, same idea. We are going to freeze the right side and make the left side equal to the right side. So we're going to take tangent x again, and I'm going to come down over here. So I have space because my fantastic picture's there. So tangent of x again, we just saw this, is sine x over cosine x. That's again just the top part of that. And we are going to not do anything to this. At the end, our answer should simplify to sine x. Now, what we also know is secant is 1 over cosine x. That's one of your reciprocal identities. So 1 over cosine x. So again, there's 2 trig functions listed here. I just rewrote each one separately in terms of sine and cosine. And now I'm going to apply regular rules of dividing fractions. Becomes times the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1 over cosine x is cosine x over 1. So again, just like number 5, dividing is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Now I have a cosine x on top right here and a cosine x on bottom, and cosine x divided by cosine x is 1. And so you'll notice that I'll go ahead and write a 1 and a 1. And all that's left is sine x, so that equals sine x times 1 divided by 1, which is just sine x. And once again, you will note that's what we are shooting for. And we are good to go on that one. So we are now going to move to the next page. and that is going to be a little bit more complicated. But again, this right side is what I should end up with at the end. Notice it's in terms of sine and cosine. So I'm going to take cosine squared x divided by cotangent x. Cosine squared is already in terms of cosine, so I'm going to leave it alone for now. And so that top of that, I don't have to do anything to because it's already in terms of cosine. Now, if we get into these a little bit more evolved, we also know cosine squared x, and we have the Pythagorean identity, which is cosine squared x plus sine squared x equals 1. So I could turn this into sines if I needed to, but for starters, we're not. We're just going to write everything in terms of sine and cosine. I'm going to leave that alone and see if that helps and works for me. Cotangent, I can change. Cotangent is 1 over tangent, but we want it in terms of sine and cosine. So cotangent is cosine x over sine x. Sorry for the really bad S there. And again, just using regular division by fractions, it's cosine squared divided by this fraction, so I can turn that into multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of cosine x over sine x is going to be sine x on top, cosine x on bottom. This is now gone because I turned division into multiply. And this cosine is now over 1. We'll write the 1 there. And notice that this cosine x is on the bottom. This cosine squared x is on the top. So what I'm allowed to do is cancel that cosine x with one of these, because that's cosine x times cosine x. So I still have a cosine x on top and a sine x. So what's left is cosine times sine, which equals, and I'm just going to change the order because you're allowed to multiply in any order, sine x times cosine x, and ba-bam, there it is, check, done. So again, if you need to pause now before I erase, because I'm about to erase, and here it goes, erased, gone. I get the erasing trick, and this is taking a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I hope you're bearing with me. And we're going to move back over here, and I'm going to move to red. Same idea here. I've got secant and cosecant on top, cotangent on bottom. This is what I'm going to end up with. Notice that it is not in terms of sine and cosine. So at the end, if I have something in terms of sine and cosine, I have to think about my other identities. So I'm going to start by rewriting secant. Secant is 1 over cosine x. Then I'm going to rewrite cosecant, which is 1 over sine x. And then I am going to rewrite cotangent. Cotangent we just did a second ago. It is still cosine x over sine x. So there's cosine x over sine x. And again, this blue stuff is dividing a fraction, so I can change dividing a fraction into times or multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of this is going to move the sine x to the top and the cosine x to the bottom. So I've changed dividing to multiply by the reciprocal. And once again, we're going to take a second and we're going to go sine x on top, sine x on the bottom cancel. Anything divided by itself is 1. I have 1s across the top now because that will leave me a 1. So this is equal to 1 on top. And the bottom, I have cosine x times cosine x, which is cosine squared x. And we are not done because that's not what I have over here. But 1 over cosine squared x is a reciprocal function of secant squared. So this actually equals, because it's a reciprocal, secant squared x. Make that square a little better. And now, there it is. Check, done. Excellent. We are going to move to slide 3, and I'm going to ask you to take a second to pause the video. I want you to try number 9 on your own. You can try 9 and 10, or you can just try 9, check the answer, then pause it again, try 10, and then check the answer. Or you can try 9 and 10, and then watch both solutions resolve. So I'm going to give you a second to pause. And then I'm going to start on solving number 9. And instead of following along, you should be checking your own work. So pause video now. Perfect. You should now have done at least number 9, possibly 10. So number 9, same strategy as 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're going to turn secant, cosecant, and cosecant squared all into terms of sine and cosine. Secant x is 1 over cosine x. Cosecant is 1 over sine x. And so I can put all of that over top of cosecant squared, which is 1 over sine squared x. Again, all reciprocal identities. Now, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over sine squared is sine squared x over 1. So I've taken care of that. And now moving along, this sine x on the bottom can cancel with one of these up top. That's just sine x times sine x. So one of them gets canceled, one is left. So I now have a sine x on top and a cosine x on bottom. And that, my friends, is equal to tangent of x. So again, we got everything in terms of sine and cosine. My answer didn't have sines and cosines, but sine x over cosine x is tangent. That was on that board I showed you right in the beginning. And we are good and done. So while I erase this one, if you need longer to look or check, pause it. Again, sometimes you may have found a solution a slightly different way. That's okay, no big deal. As long as your math checks out, we're good to go. All right, so if you haven't already done number 10, you should now pause the video, do number 10, and then come back in a minute, and we are going to look at how the left side can be manipulated to equal 1/2 sine squared. So give it a pause right this minute. All right, assuming now you've completed number 10, we're going to turn all of this stuff on the left into sines and cosines. So tangent squared x is going to be sine squared x over cosine squared x. Just like tangent is sine over cosine, it's tangent squared is sine squared x over cosine squared x. That cosine is already a cosine, so I'm just going to write it next to it, but I'm going to go ahead and write it as cosine x over 1 because I have a fraction on the left. Now, the bottom is 2 secant, so I'm going to write a 2 there, but secant is 1 over cosine, so I'm going to write the cosine of x in the bottom of that. And once again, dividing by fractions is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, so when I reciprocate this, the cosine x moves to the top, and the 2 moves to the bottom, and this is all gone. Now I'm going to go to town canceling things out. Whatever I can, I will cancel. This cosine x and this cosine x would be cosine squared. This is a cosine squared, so really what happens is this cosine cancels one of these. This cosine cancels the other one, so there are no more cosines. I had cosine squared here, got cosine squared there, no more cosine squareds. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write, all right, well, I've got a sine squared, nothing cancels with that. And I have that over 2, and because I know that dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2, that is the same as 1/2 sine squared x, and that is what I needed to check. Hopefully that went well for you, and we are done with these, and you now have some to practice on your own. So enjoy.